Okay, today I'd like to present to you my action research project that I was responsible for conducting in the school counseling program at Campbellsville University. The research question I posed was, what is the effect of web-based intervention program iReady Math versus face-to-face teacher-directed services for our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade math students? So the purpose of the study was to determine the best approach for our intervention services for our intermediate math students. This participation school was Shottville Elementary. It is one of our 8 elementary schools in the Pulaski County School District. It is made up approximately of 382 students. Over 85% of those students are considered free and reduced lunch. We were a 2019-2020 Blue Ribbon recipient school. The area of focus for this was just our intermediate math, so that would be our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students, and this study was conducted for 6 weeks. Just a little overview of our students and our services and our study that we conducted here. We had 10 participants selected, so that was 10 for 3rd grade, 10 for 4th, and 10 for 5th. These students were selected based on their initial placement in the fall iReady diagnostic that was given the end of August and 1st of September. These students were then divided up into a control group and an experimental group. The controlled group was spent with the teacher during their intervention time, while the experimental group was spent in the computer lab using only the iReady Math program during their win time. The participants again were 10 3rd grade, 10 4th grade, and 10 5th grade students. They were not mixed abilities, they were at various grade level abilities, but had all scored similar on their diagnostic in the fall. All the participants were Caucasian and they were of mixed gender. I had more boys in the 4th and 5th grade groups and less boys in the 3rd grade group, which had more girls in it. The data collection started this fall with the initial diagnostic benchmark for iReady. Other data collected was for their growth monitoring checks as they progressed through the 6-week study. Teacher observations were done during all 3 blocks, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, 3 times a week for approximately 30 minutes. And then there's a student voice survey given at the very end of our 6 weeks. Here's a collection chart. So this again shows at the very beginning of it our pre and post-test data, our quantitative data consisted of just merely our iReady initial diagnostic results and those growth monitoring results. The classroom observation, the qualitative data, was myself doing the observations 3 times a week for 3rd grade, 4th, and 5th grade students. And then at the very end of it, we had a student voice survey so the students could voice their preference in learning style and how they felt like the online iReady program helped them versus the teacher-directed instruction. So the instruments I used, it says the iReady diagnostic is an adaptive assessment. Adaptive assessment means that it scores the students where they're at. For example, all students will start out at a 4th grade level. I'm a 4th grade math teacher. When they start out taking this test, they start out at 4th grade standards. If the student answers those questions correct in those domains, then they give them more challenging questions. If the student does not do well or cannot answer those questions, they may bump those standards back to where they were at a 3rd grade level. So adaptive means that it places every student where they're at in each domain. And the domains listed are numbers and operations in base 10, numbers and operations in fractions, algebra, measurement and data, and geometry. So here's the timeline. The very beginning of our study, I looked at their last year's MAP scores and compared them to their initial benchmark scores. So I wanted to see similarities and consistencies before I chose my participants. So after my participants were chosen, from the 2-week to 6-week mark, the only thing that was done was their growth monitoring results, where I could see their scale score either increase or decrease in the different domains, and then look at their observation information as I watched them during their intervention block. And then week 6, all students, controlled and experimental students, took the same growth monitoring check so I could see the growth between the domains. They also did a student voice survey at the very end of it, again, to show their learning preference. There was literature that was conducted along with the study. Several articles were read over the effect of using technology in the classroom and how that can benefit students. So these are the sources of my information. And here's my major findings. So the major component of being successful in math is understanding and being fluent in the 4 operations, which are adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. There are several technology-based programs that help students practice those skills. So there's been several math apps now that we are tablet, laptop, Chromebook, iPad, iPod friendly in schools. There are several apps that have been added to help the students do that. So when the same digital resources are used across all grade levels, then there can be certain scores that you can show the increase of. But what happens is if these are game-based programs, then sometimes the students aren't doing what they need to do to grow within those domains. They're more worried about like the game factor that goes into it. So hopefully that it would help with conceptual understanding other than it just be a fun way to learn. Something else is there's various web-based programs that provide differentiated learning through visual models, animations, quizzes, games that are capable of audio, which helps the students with their reading. A growing trend is the ability to provide students with adaptive learning, which is what iReady is. That means it meets them where they're at in each domain. And mobile learning can have students spend additional time at home or on the go working through skills that they lack or skills that they're struggling with in the classroom setting. Some other major findings for the adaptive online instruction is the incorporation of math interventions, which is what's the basis of my study and what piqued my interest. There are numerous ways to incorporate math interventions within a school setting. Many of those are technology-based. So since these adaptive assessments place students on their own level, students can be challenged. In addition to, they can also help bridge those gaps of where they have learning deficits. Here's the theorist that I worked with, and here's the framework on e-learning, which is the same as online learning. So here are some of the research results. So now we're kind of getting the meat of the study. So here's the results. These are the fall iReady diagnostic results by domain. So you have your blue is your 3rd grade students, your orange color is your 4th, and then the gray is the 5th grade students. Each one of those diagnostics is broken into the domain. So we have base 10, fractions, algebra, geometry, and measurement. So you can see these are all an average of the participants' scale scores. So that was their fall domain. Okay, so here is the growth monitoring results for the experimental group. So same thing, we have base 10, fractions, algebra, geometry, and measurement, and you can see how most of these scale scores increased some as they process through their growth monitoring for those 6 weeks. And then here was for the control group. Same thing, all your math domains broken apart, your 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, so you can see the bars as they increased. These were the teacher observations. So I looked at 4 different areas for teacher observations, and several things, several checklists went into these, but this was kind of an average of what I was looking for. So I wanted to see their on-task behavior, their positive attitude, how well they were working in their classroom setting or in their lab setting, their problem-solving abilities, and then their overall involvement. So this was for the 3rd grade observation group for the control group. So that means people were with the teacher during their time, and these students were on the computer during their time. So the biggest thing, there's not many variances through that. The biggest thing that I noticed was their time right here, was their overall involvement. So you had 90% here versus 85% here. And most of that was because there was class discussion going on with the teacher, where there was no discussion at all, independent work during the experimental group. So my 4th grade students looked very similar. My biggest difference here was for the observation group for the control group, which was teacher directed. We had 90% versus 70%. So again, this was because the teacher had discussions going on, she had group work going on, there was games going on at some time to help their learning. So that was a lot different than a student just working independently on the computer during this time. And then for the 5th grade, it was very similar. So again, you have all your different 4 areas, and then the biggest difference noticed was your overall involvement and time on task. So this varied a little bit for 5th grade. There had to be quite a bit more redirecting for our 5th grade students while they were in the computer lab during their intervention time. This is the very end of our 6 weeks, was the results of the student voice survey. So I broke them up into males and females because there's a different preference, and males tend to like technology stuff better than my females, as I've gathered through 4th grade because of the video game aspect of it. So in favor of online intervention services, you had 60% male versus the 40% that would rather have the teacher. Fourth grade males was split 50-50, and then fifth grade males were 50-50 also. Okay, when we get to females, it actually reverses. The females would much rather have a teacher than being on the computer. Same thing for my fourth grade females, and then same thing for my fifth grade females. They would rather have that class instruction versus just being on a computer during their intervention time. So here are kind of the common themes between the experimental and the control group as I did the observations. So the experimental group, again, the students had to be redirected more often to stay on task because there was not a teacher in there kind of watching them and encouraging conversation. The students did work independently more. Some of the students did not pass their lesson with 80% mastery or above. There were certain lessons where I saw students kind of clicking through the lessons, so there wasn't a lot of learning going on during that time. And then they struggle with some of the problem-solving abilities. Ready is a rigorous program, has a lot of word problems that goes along with it, and sometimes unless they're really paying attention and really applying what they know, it's hard to understand what the problem is asking them to do. And then the content and grade level varied based on the student because each one of them had their own individual pathways. For the control group, most of the students remained on task because the teacher was there directing their instruction. The students were able to work in partners, small group, and then did some independent work. The teacher was able to help the students progress through their lessons. So if they were working, whether it's paper pencil or on a quiz or using QR codes, the teacher was able to help them through that. And then they were able to use various techniques to problem solve, base 10 blocks. Some use calculators, some use placemats with place value charts on it. There's a lot of different resources that the teacher brought out to help them understand their skills. So as we conclude, to me the evidence proved that the students who were below level, okay, in all domains, received higher results from direct instruction. That teacher was able to bridge that gap better than just using a computer program. The participants that started out at or above grade level showed consistent growth in both. I mean, whether they're in the control group or experimental group, they still had growth throughout all domains. So based on the analyzed results, the effect of this web program did positively impact our students, but I do not think it gave me enough data to say that that should be the only way our students should receive intervention services throughout 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So as I kind of conclude again, this conclusion was based on observations, results, and then their data from their pre and post test. So even though the students did progress and did make several gains throughout those math domains, I do not think that it would be positive to just solely use on a computer. I feel like a good combination of teacher-directed and computer programs would probably be best for our math students. So as I share the results, so I'm in a PLC right now with several of you all, and I have also met with the 3rd grade math teacher, Ms. Coldiron, and the 5th grade math teacher, Ms. Caldwell, since it involved her students also, and talked to them about some of their results, as well as get their opinions about how that they are doing math intervention services during their other days I did not observe, and how well that was going through for their classroom. Since iReady is new to our district and has just recently been implemented with our standards mastery and everyone using the same books and using the program, I feel like this would be good to share at a professional development conference and to let other people voice their concerns or opinions or share their positive findings with that. But my feel is I don't really know if we are using this program like it should be used to get our biggest gains from it. So this was purchased for all the elementary and middle school students, as I told you. However, very little information was provided on best practices for implementation, which is what I just spoke of. So this study may help us evaluate how we use the program in the future, as well as how we talk to our K through 2nd grade about using this program to help them get ready for 3rd grade math. So the impact of my study, the question is posed now, is how can we use a combination study of teacher-directed intervention and the iReady program to best serve our students in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade math? So I feel like that using both of these, we can promote foundational math principles, bridge our learning gaps, foster problems with our problem-solving abilities, and provide students with the necessary grade level skills to be proficient by the end for our year-end assessments. So some things that kind of like our limitations for studies. As I was working through this, students that were absent, I had to try to make up intervention time with them. As we know, technology is great when it works, but when it didn't work, that became frustrating. We had to kind of rearrange our schedule to get some of that time in. And that's just something else to think about when you're wanting to just use a technology program for intervention, is sometimes technology doesn't always work. So my biggest thing is I feel like a combination is going to be our best practice. Thank you very much.